us today. My name is Dale Alakel, and I'm a volunteer with First United Methodist Church of Seattle, also known as First Church. And I also chair the Church and Society Social Justice Committee, which is the group which started Meaningful Movies at First Church. Today, we're going to hear from two wonderful speakers who will answer the question, what can we do about the climate crisis? We'll also talk about Climate Solutions 101, the Project Drawdown video series, which you may or may not have had a chance to watch. As we get started, I acknowledge that we're on the traditional land of the first peoples of Seattle, the Duwamish people, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and all Native people. But how can we show our gratitude for the land and all its creatures and all its resources? Well, we hope that today's conversation will inform us and will inspire us to work for climate justice. Now is not the time for despair. Now is not the time for denial or for apathy. Now is the time to face the climate crisis squarely, learn what we can do, and take action. So that's why we're here today. So thank you to each of you for joining us. We're really glad you're here. A couple of announcements. We are recording this event. So if you don't want to appear in the recording, please turn off your video function. Your microphone will be muted. During our Q&A time, if you have questions for our speakers, please place your questions in chat. Thank you so much to Nikki Askoff. Nikki, wave to us, a First Church volunteer who's providing tech support for this event. And thank you also to Ann Miller, who is from Meaningful Movies Project. If you need help with Zoom, you can ask Ann Miller, see the chat, and we'll be putting her contact information in chat. Meaningful Movies at First Church is one of about 30 venues of the not-for-profit Meaningful Movies Project.
Whoops.
At each venue, people come together to learn about social justice issues and how to take steps to make our world more just and sustainable. Thanks to Mount Baker Meaningful Movies and West Seattle Meaningful Movies for co-sponsoring our conversation today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Carlson, who will introduce our speakers and moderate our discussion. Tom started.
Dale,
yes.
You need to take a breath here so that I can mute all, and you can explain that when the speakers all need to unmute themselves, because I cut you off when you were speaking.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
There we go.
So to our speakers, when it's your turn to speak, you'll have to unmute yourselves. So yeah, thank you, Nikki. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tom Carlson. Tom started and is leading the Climate Justice Working Group at First Church. Tom, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Great to see you all here today. Here's what we're going to be doing in the remainder of this hour. First, we're going to hear from our two speakers. We'll have about 20 minutes from that. Then we will take your questions in chat. Please put any questions in chat that you have, and we will field those questions with our two speakers. And then next, we'll break into small group discussions in breakout rooms for about 10 minutes, and Dale will describe that a little bit more later. Then we'll reconvene and have a wrap-up session before we close. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Reverend Jenny Phillips. Jenny is the Senior Technical Advisor on Environmental Sustainability for the Board of Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church. She directs renewable energy and energy efficiency programs and creation care programs. She also convenes what's called the United Methodist Church Interagency Coalition on Net Zero Emissions. Welcome, Jenny. And it's also my pleasure to introduce Shimona Moreno, who, at least as of earlier this week, you were the Director of Equity and Volunteer Engagement at First Church Seattle, but I think there's late breaking news maybe that now you're the Deputy Director of 350 Seattle. Shimona is a lifelong activist who fights tirelessly to undo the systems of oppression that have led to the climate crises. She, back in 2016, started with 350 Seattle as a volunteer in the Defund the Dakota's Access Pipeline campaign. And she's gone on from there. It's about all she wrote in terms of getting the bug for organizing, and has risen to near the top. And so we're really glad to have you, Shimona. So we're going to start with Jenny. You're going to kick things off for us. And you work for a global mission and humanitarian organization. You also work with faith communities on ways they can take action and decision points. And we're going to ask you if you can share with us some of the opportunities there may be for individuals and organizations and agencies to take action in our individual and collective lives. So I'll turn it over to you. And please feel free to put your questions in chat as Jenny's speaking. Jenny?
Fantastic. And Tom, just so I understand, we're not doing Q. They'll put questions in the chat now, but we'll discuss them later on, right?
After
Okay.
you and Shimona speak. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. It's a delight to be with you. I am joining you from the land of the Muskogee Creek people in Decatur, Georgia. And I just want to note how much I appreciate the land acknowledgement at the beginning of this session. If you're not on either of the lands that have been mentioned and you want to put what land you're on in the chat, if you know, please share it in the chat. And if not, I can post a link later where you can find out. I think that as we're talking about caring for the earth, caring for the climate and the flourishing of creation, it's really important to not just be thinking about this moment in time, but about the history of where we are and the previous stewards that have inhabited the land where we are. Even though I live in Georgia, I call Seattle home. I grew up attending Aldersgate United Methodist Church in Bellevue. I'm a graduate of the University of Washington, and Bishop Elaine sent me to Georgia to serve at Global Ministries, which is the humanitarian and relief organization of the United Methodist Church. So I'm appointed here, but still an elder from the Pacific Northwest Conference. And I'm really excited to be here with you all today to share a little bit about what's happening in the larger United Methodist Church and what connections there are that folks can engage in their local churches and in their lives. And I had one other thought I wanted to say, and now it's just left me, but let's just dive in. I've got some slides to share with you all. So we'll start with a little bit of context within the United Methodist Church. And I know there may be some folks here from other traditions, so welcome, and know that as I share some grounding in the United Methodist context, you might think to yourself, well, in my faith tradition, what resources might we have that could help ground my work in environmental justice ministries? One of the many strengths of the United Methodist Church is that it is a large global denomination, and we have a great capacity for a global multidimensional response to the climate crisis. That is grounded in our social principles. We have a series of principles that guide our work and social engagement in the social aspects of the world. And the very first principle actually connects our social connection with the world, with God's creation, with the physical world. It says that all creation is the Lord's, and we are responsible for the ways in which we use and abuse it. Water, air, soil, minerals, energy, resources, plants, animal life, and space are all to be valued. They're all to be conserved because they are God's creation, not just because they're useful to human beings. We also have a number of resolutions. These are statements of the denomination on a variety of issues, including a number of resolutions related to caring for the environment. Now, these resolutions are created by General Conference, which is a body of United Methodists representatives from our conferences around the world that come together every 4 years to say, here's what we believe about who we are to be in the world. So that's the source of these resolutions. And if you're United Methodist and you want to know more about them, check in with Pastor Jeremy or with your pastor to find out where to get a copy of the Book of Resolutions. But one of the resolutions that is very grounding is this caring for creation, a call to stewardship and justice, where we say that confronted with the massive crisis of the deterioration of God's creation, we commit ourselves to a new way of being that integrates environmental, economic, and social justice. As United Methodists, we therefore are called to participate in the healing of creation. So if you're a United Methodist here and you want to take some action in your church, and someone in church says, oh, well, that's just your issue, you're a big tree hugger. No, no, no. This is a denominational issue that we have made commitments on as a denomination. And so it's a matter that is of concern to the entire local church, whether or not the members of the church are all aware of that concern. And similarly, if you are speaking to a state legislator or a member of Congress or someone else in a position of influence about your environmental concerns, you aren't just there as your own voice, you are United Methodist. And this is what we believe about our relationship to the environment and the importance of caring for it. This resolution goes on to speak to different parts of the church and the specific things they're called to do. And this piece is about global ministries, that we will explore and implement tangible ways to incorporate creation care. That's another phrase for caring for the environment, environmental justice, into the mission, ministries, training programs, operations, and administration of the General Board of Global Ministries. So that's essentially my job, is taking on this piece of responsibility to ensure that the ways in which we are engaging in the work of our agency integrates these values around environmental justice. And we see it manifested in our agency's theology of mission, which says that God's mission reclaims the life of all creatures and redeems all of creation for God's intended purpose. God's light shines in every corner of the earth, and God's mission extends to all of creation. Now, I will say, my experience growing up in the church is that it is not always apparent to me through the mission work of the church that God's mission extends to all of creation. That's a thing that we need to be lifting up more as we are engaged in ministries around disaster response, around working alongside folks who are struggling with being unhoused, and other types of programs. The many ways in which we are engaged in ministry with one another are all opportunities to express our value of God's love for all of creation and God's love for humanity as a part of God's creation. So Global Ministries, along with 11 other agencies of the United Methodist Church, about a year ago made a commitment to net zero emissions by 2050 across ministries, facilities, operations, and investments, and to leverage the gifts of our connection, putting equity and justice at the center as we build a net zero emission economy by 2050. And in that we say we will work both to reduce the principal cause of climate disruption, which is greenhouse gas emissions, and to support a just and equitable transition that dismantles structural barriers to racial and gender equity and builds resilient, flourishing communities. Because we know that climate disruption disproportionately impacts people of color, it disproportionately impacts women, and it disproportionately impacts people experiencing other vulnerabilities. And so we can't take on this work of emission reduction without understanding that a key part of that work is mitigating those impacts and not causing more harm through our emission reduction strategies. Now, I've got a little funky thing here. I'm sorry, this little picture's covering a little of the slide, but you all have watched the resources from Drawdown, which are excellent. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at them, I hope you will, or at least visit drawdown.org to get a little peek at what the work that they're doing, because they're identifying ways that we can bring the concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere to a place where it's declining and stabilizing. So these are the solutions they're bringing are practices and technologies that measurably decrease the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And friends, this is a resource of hope. I mean, I have the book, the website, all of it. It gives you a sense that the challenges are massive and there really is a path forward. So in that resource, they talk about several different sources, major sources of greenhouse gas emissions: electricity, food, agriculture and land use, industry, transportation, buildings. These are all familiar things to us, right? And we touch these different aspects of greenhouse gas emissions in our daily lives, really. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some of the ways that we're engaged with drawing down some of these sources of emissions, and do a little bit of sharing about opportunities that others might be able to do some of the things that we're involved in. I'm having a moment of fussiness. Here we go. Now with our greenhouse gas reduction commitment, we are using a variety of tools to measure our emissions and look at how we're going to draw them down. We are using the Greenhouse Gas Protocol as a base for emission measurement. This is the tool that's used by countries, corporations, and non-governmental organizations around the world. And it's so that as we better understand and track our emissions, we are able to see our emissions apples to apples with other entities that are measuring their emissions. It's a bit of a complicated tool, but there's another tool that is quite accessible called Energy Star Portfolio Manager. This is a resource from the US Environmental Protection Agency that has a whole program for congregations where you can upload your energy bills, water use bills information, waste management information, and get a greenhouse gas emissions report, as well as data about how your building usage fits in with buildings, similar buildings in your region, so that you can see, like, are we doing well with how we're managing our energy, with how we're using water, with how we're managing our waste, or have other folks got it figured out in a better way than we do, and there's more we can do to reduce our emissions. Fantastic tool, and we offer webinars on how to use it occasionally, so if you're interested in that, slip me a note in the chat. And then the agencies working on this commitment are also developing resources for things like, how do we think about travel in the context of the church? How do we think about meeting planning, especially large events, and how to keep emissions down? So those are resources we are developing.
Jenny,
Yes.
we're running out of time, so can the way we can
Sure. Yeah. Sorry about that.
it's okay.
I thought I had 10 minutes. I apologize. Okay. So a few places. So how long? What do I have?
Take a couple more minutes if you can.
Couple more minutes. All right, real quick then. We are working on integrating renewable energy into disaster response. As we engage in disaster response when there's major weather events, we are partnering with organizations that can build temporary solar solutions. We are implementing solar on our own building and looking at, actually we have solar, we're considering more, and we are a LEED Platinum building in Georgia and are still looking at ways we can make it even more efficient. And we're implementing renewable energy in healthcare facilities that we work with around the world. Skip that, I'll skip this. We're also engaging renewable energy in agriculture with our partners who work in agriculture around the world, providing solar irrigation. This is a picture of our offices in Atlanta, where we share space with a community kitchen. So we have a community garden here that anyone who would like to gather food from it can, and it's a great use of property. We are also, in all the programming I lead, all of our meals are vegetarian because we know that reducing consumption of meat reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And we're implementing a composting program as we reopen to help better manage our food waste. We have a program for United Methodist called Global Ministries Earthkeepers, which equips United Methodist to develop projects in their communities to reduce emissions and work for environmental justice. And I believe a link will be shared in the chat if that's a program that interests the Global Ministries Creation Care Network, which is a crowdsourcing space for United Methodist to share the work they're doing, the events that they are leading, and other resources. I will leave it at that for now. Thanks so much and looking forward to hearing Shimona.
Thank you, Jenny. It was very inspiring to hear those strategies and opportunities that not only pertain to the global mission of the United Methodist Church, but to other large organizations and organizations and individuals, and what we can do. So I appreciate it very much. Please, if you have questions for Jenny, please put them in the chat. Now I want to turn it over to Shimona. Shimona, from policy work to direct action, you say that 350 Seattle fights for a just and livable future. So please tell us about your work and some ways people and organizations can join you in the movement to mobilize people and take action.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Shimona Moreno. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Deputy Director at 350 Seattle. I am happy to be here with all of y'all. I'm calling in from Still-Squamish Coast Salish Territory, otherwise known as Greenwood. And I don't have slides for y'all today, but I would enjoy like maybe seeing everybody's faces and names, even if everyone doesn't have their screen on. First, I just want to share that at 350 Seattle, our mission is to work towards climate justice by organizing people to make deep system change, which resisting fossil fuels, building momentum for healthy alternatives, and fostering resilient, just, and welcoming communities. Basically, in other words, we just remind people that the climate crisis isn't just inevitable because of human nature, but that it's a result of very problematic systems. We remind people they have the power to change those systems and to provide the tools and skills they need to activate that power is what and to fight for something different which is kind of like at the core of what we do at 350 Seattle. And we do that in a variety of ways. We kind of like split our work up into like 4 different buckets, which is resistance work, so fighting against fossil fuel infrastructure like coal, oil, or gas. And then also on a bucket of work is holding all of the polluters and the people who finance those fossil fuel infrastructure accountable. So that's kind of like how I first got into the work, is like defunding the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so maybe some of you have heard about a couple national organizations called Stop the Money Pipeline. They are all in on holding polluters accountable. A third bucket of work that we work on here is policy focus and solutions, like our Green New Deal campaigns, and some of the work that we do in ports and even at the state level in the legislative policy advocacy. And then the fourth bucket of work that we focus on is like movement building, base building, community building, and how a lot of that work is the backbone to some of the other buckets of work that we have. So today I want to really share more of just like, actions you can take with 350 Seattle. And sometimes it's not even just with 350 Seattle. We do a lot of coalition and partner work. And especially in our Green New Deal work, we are starting to do a lot more work with unions and labor organizers. That's why there are a lot of my peeps and volunteers are at the May Day March in Seattle. They're going to get going in like an hour or so. So if anybody wants to rush out there after the call, meet up with everybody. Today is International Workers' Rights. There are going to be marches all over the world. And at 350 Seattle, that's one of the things of how, like, if we're going to be building these just resilient communities, we need to make sure that we are looking at the intersections of not just climate and workers, but climate and gender, and climate and race, and making sure that we're not sticking in our little climate crisis silos, but we're doing that work across different issues and justice systems, because like we can't just do one side of the work without addressing another side. It's just like, one, it's exhausting doing it all alone. And it's so much better to do that work in partnership and in coalition. So at 350 Seattle, we have quite a few things going on. Right now, kicking off is our Green New Deal Seattle Parks campaign. If you're interested in doing work around building community resilience, this new campaign that we're going to be launching will be all about leveraging the levy at the Seattle Parks and Rec to use the money that they have in that levy to install like heat pumps for clean energy and cooling, upgrading HVAC for clean air, adding rooftop solar for backup power, to basically build out resiliency in each communities at our different parks, so that when, unfortunately, smoke season comes, that we have places for like our elders and for our children and for those who are unhoused, places to go where they can stay cool and be taken care of. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of things we have to also take care of our people while also fighting for these long-term solutions. So we want to make sure that we're adapting now and also doing adaptation for later. And so that's a really exciting campaign that we're going to be doing with in coalition with a lot of unions. And I can definitely, that we don't have, that campaign will be launching later in May. And it's already getting underway right now. Another really cool opportunity for you to get involved is to check out Stop the Money Pipeline. It is a national organization which 350 Seattle helped found. It is now an organization with over 175 different organizations across the country participating in these actions. And I will share the link with y'all here. Ooh, it won't let me paste it. I thought I would be able to do this. My apologies.
Shimona, I'll work on that. I'll put it in chat.
Okay, here we go. I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. You know, you think after 2 years on Zoom, I'd be a little, I'm like, yeah, I got it. And then no, you don't. Thank you for your patience. So here's a couple of links of where you can start to get to know what Stop the Money Pipeline is doing, holding up polluters and insurance companies and banks accountable. And they're going to be kicking off for the next May and June actions, letters and emails, calls, things that you can do to contact the top dogs of these banks and insurance companies, because right now this is when the time they have their annual shareholder meetings. And so that is a perfect time to let them hear from us, the community, being like, hey, when are you going to stop funding these fossil fuel projects and start funding renewable energy? And so Stop the Money Pipeline is going to be putting, if you click on the second link, that is a really great opportunity to do some trainings, to learn more about what you can do locally and in your community. And if you are part of an organization, you can also sign on to be part of the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition. And then locally here in Seattle, we are just now, we've finished hiring a campaign organizer who's going to help project manage some direct actions that we're going to be doing here in Seattle. And that'll be, if you want to sign up at our website and join either our action alerts or get our newsletter, you can sign up at 350seattle.org and you can get information of upcoming actions in Seattle local, and also things you can do from home as well. If you are not able to be out in the streets with us, there are definitely opportunities to do things from your very own home in your own time, in your own capacity. Because that's how we want to make sure everything is accessible and that we can meet everybody's needs. Another thing I want to share with y'all that we do is our civic action team, which happens at the state level, and I'm seeing some people from other places like Julie from Everett and Spokane. I see a couple people. So wonderful to see you here. And that is another way to plug into, at the state level, learning a little bit more of how to engage with our legislative system, because they like to make it really complicated. I don't know if anybody's gone on their website and seen like, how does this work? I have no idea. And then we have our legislators coming down saying like, we didn't hear from you. Sorry, we didn't realize you cared about the environment. Well, like maybe if you made it easier for us to talk to you, you would hear from us. And so that's what we do at Civic Action Team. The Civic Action Team is education. And like we have whole trainings on just how to use the website, and like providing talking points so you can talk to your legislators and representatives. And right now we are coming off of the session, and you're doing a deep debrief of just like, hey, how was that? How did people feel participating in it? Talking to our representatives and our partners of just like, how was it working with us? And so that's what we do. We want to make sure that we're creating accessible campaigns and education materials for everyone. And then we will come back in the fall and start all over again. And it was really exciting this year. We had some pretty good wins with our transportation package. I don't know if people were paying attention to that. And we got a really like historic amount of money for new transportation and kids riding free on, and just like investments. There are some things that we didn't win, but that is pretty amazing win this year. And we're excited to see, take from that energy and keep going with this next legislative session. Yeah, that's awesome, Dwight. It's so good to hear. Like we want to make sure that we're empowering people to just be like, we voted for you. We're allowed to talk to you and tell you what we need as our community. So I really encourage people to check out the Civic Action Team at the Washington state level. And I think I just want to be conscious of time. I do want to share, if you are interested in learning more about like 350 Seattle in general, and getting plugged in on a variety of different ways, we hold a new volunteer orientation that kind of goes a little more in depth about 350 Seattle, our structure and our different teams. And you can sign up for that at this Zoom link right here. And it's usually me and my colleague who run it, and we kind of do it in this really lovely, caring way that we're just like super excited about. And we get to answer any of the questions that you have about 350 Seattle and just like ways that you can use your skills, your knowledge, your desires to like plug in and, tackle the climate crisis. And then also, if it's being deputy director, it's a hustle out here. If you feel like you have the means, we would love for you to support financially 350 Seattle. Any amount is welcome, and we are just so thankful for that. And the other thing that I'm really excited about, and I'll share just a little bit, is just like how I got involved with 350 Seattle was through art. I was tasked with like, in your neighborhood, you get to do an actions. And so you have to create some materials and go out and like protest outside Wells Fargo's banks. And I was just like, say what now? What are we doing? Oh my goodness. But I took the challenge on, and I remember creating, it was right around Christmas time. We created all these different banners. We covered them with like ribbons, and we rewrote Christmas songs to like say like defund Wells Fargo, and like it was quite a magical time. And from there I got really involved with doing a lot of our art builds and creating a lot of the banners and coming up with interesting street theater ways of like, letting people know that there are things that we need to be paying attention to, and how you can get involved. We recently held an art build last week, creating imagery and banners for the march today. And also we support a lot of our other partners and organizations like Missing and Murdered Indigenous People. We also for like Decriminalize Seattle, because we believe through art, that's where we can really build a lot of community. And also just like to really grab people's attention through art and storytelling is a really great way of connecting with people and getting them to kind of like take that first step from just like, ooh, I don't know what I want to do, to like, I know what I'm going to do. here's how I'm going to participate. Plus, it's such a joy to be doing community art together. And we are in the Solstice Parade coming up. First time in like 2 years, they're finally going to have the Solstice Parade in Fremont in person. And so that there's going to be lots of art builds coming up at 350 Seattle if you are interested in doing community art.
Thank you so much, Shimona. That I just want to interject here that we've had thoughts here at First Church in our climate justice group of actually trying to do some street theater or drama. And so it's really important to hear about it, as well as all the other buckets and campaigns that you have going on. Before we go, we only have so far one question in the chat, but I just want to say here, give a shout out to the Stop the Money Pipeline campaign, your coalitional work. Last week, I attended a training for customers for climate justice. And, everybody has a banker. And, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank, Chase. It was very inspiring to see how the support you could get to actually go and talk to your bank branch manager and express your concerns, and the effectiveness of that. And I also want to give a shout out to the Civic Action Team. I found it a very easy way to track relevant climate legislation going on in the legislature and to participate. You made it very easy. So I want to thank you for all those ideas about how to plug in and join the people movement that you have going on. And Jenny, a lot of what you talked about is translatable to other institutions, and we thank you for that. We do have one question in the chat, and that's for Jenny, and that is, how do you see the goal of net zero by 2050 trickling down to local churches? Will greenhouse gases be measured at individual church level?
Thanks, Judy. I don't see it so much as an initiative that will trickle down, but an initiative that will rise up. At the denominational level, among the agencies that made this commitment, it really came out of us putting our heads together, saying, like, we need to stretch more than we are currently stretching in how we do our work. And so the scope of our commitment is our agency's work in the ways that we do our work, the ways we run our operations, our facilities, our ministries. And so we are ready to share the resources we're discovering with local churches, but we can't commit on your behalf. Only a local church can make a commitment like this on its own behalf. And so I would love to see some local churches step up and say, we're going to try this. We want to make a commitment to net zero emissions. And it's something where I don't want to take too much time. I know we're tight, but know that we didn't know how to do it when we made this commitment. We are figuring it out every step of the way, and it's real work and a real commitment. And we're happy to share what we're learning with any local church that's interested in making this kind of commitment for themselves.
And on a related front, I note that 350 Seattle has on its agenda the Solar Schools initiative as part of the Green New Deal, and then building into clean standards into all buildings in the city of Seattle as a legislative initiative, and I appreciate that. Are there any other questions in the chat? I don't see any other questions in
Tom,
the chat.
I see one more question.
And that is from where?
Do you want me to read it out?
Sure.
So the question is, how can we reconcile with other Christians that believe that humans can subdue and have dominion over the earth per the Bible, and therefore feel free to not participate in protection of resources or stewardship of the environment? So Jenny, do you want to take that?
I would love to take this. Some of you may be familiar with the author Bill McKibben, and you may or may not know he is a United Methodist, and he is the founder, one of the founders of 350.org. Bill has a really lovely, pithy statement about this. This question is responding to text in the Bible that, where God tells the first human to fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over it. And Bill McKibben's response to that is like, okay, Fill the earth, done. Subdue the earth, done. Dominate the earth, done. We have checked off those things that God has said in that one particular text. We have done less in the other creation story text of caring for the earth and allowing it to flourish. And, you know, actually right after God tells the first people, if you all were in the sermon this morning, you heard a touch of this, that they can eat anything they want from the garden, but just don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, the first thing they do is they say, well, this isn't enough. I want more. The first sin, the thing that breaks our relationship between God and humans and the earth, is an act of overconsumption. That is the grounding upon which our tradition is built, is an act of overconsumption and the need for reconciliation and redemption from that act, that core act that led to all types of misery. And so if you want to say we need to dominate the earth, we have. And there's a whole book following that first chapter of Genesis that explains why we have much more work to do.
Thank you, Jenny. I think that wraps it up for questions from the chat. I want to thank you both very much. And again, I encourage you to go to 350 Seattle website, find out how you can join up and also support great work that's being done. I'll turn it over to you, Dale.
All right, well, thank you, Tom and Jenny and Shimona. It's time for breakout rooms. Who was it? Catherine Hayhoe, an environmentalist, said, talk more with each other about the climate crisis and what you can do. So we're going to give you an opportunity to go into breakout rooms and do that. And then afterward, at the end, we'll do a quick wrap up. And I have a couple of really important announcements I want to make. So stay with us till 1. In a moment, you're going to see the discussion questions for your breakout rooms on the screen. Please take out your smartphone camera and take a photo.
Welcome back, everybody. I just turned on my mic. I hope you had great conversations in your small groups in the breakout rooms. I know we did. It's now my job to wrap up or summarize what we heard today, which I find to be kind of a daunting task. But both Reverend Jenny and Shimona gave us a great menu of options for strategies and actions we can take going forward. Ann Miller, who is in my small group, said that she gains hope from seeing this as, it's not my job to save the world, it's my job to walk through the world that I want to see. And I think you both have given us, our speakers today have given us a lot of vision for the world we want to see. So I think I'll just leave it at that. I know we're short on time, and I'll turn it back to Dale for the final closing and announcements.
Thank you, Tom. So first of all, thank you to Tom Carlson for moderating, and thank you again to Jenny and Shimona for speaking with us. We really appreciate your time and everything you do about the climate crisis. Thank you again to Meaningful Movies Project and to Ann Miller. Thank you to Nikki Askoff for all the tech support. And thank you to each of you for joining us today. Join the movement now. Now is the time to take action in whatever way you can, at home, at work, in your community, in wherever you are. And in the next few days, we are going to follow up and send an email to everyone who registered. There were over 70 people who registered today. We're going to send an email with resources, the resources that were shared today in the chat, plus some other resources about how you can take action, how you can take steps. So please share those resources with people you know. Please share a link to the Project Drawdown Climate Solutions 101 video series, which is wonderful. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, please go watch it. We'll include another link to that. So share it with folks you know. So finally, I want to invite you to our next Meaningful Movies event. It's going to happen on Thursday, June 9th at 6 p.m. The topic will be voter suppression and what we can do to combat it. So at this virtual event, there will be a 45-minute film live streamed. And the film is called Suppressed and Sabotaged, The Fight to Vote. It's an updated 2022 version of the 2020 film. Very exciting announcement. Robert Greenwald, the film's producer and director, will join us to introduce the film. And after the 45-minute live stream of the film, we're going to hear from panelists about what we can do. We're going to co-sponsor this event with the Meaningful Movies Project, several other Meaningful Movies venues, and Fix Democracy First. So mark your calendars, Thursday, June 9th at 6 p.m. So with that, thank you so much to each and every one of you for being here for this really important conversation. And thanks again to our speakers and to Nikki and to Meaningful Movies Project. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.